Salam Chetori. G'day guys and welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have the absolute pleasure of chatting with Mehdi Bazyar, who is an Iranian English professor or teacher based in Iran. He recently reached out to me on Instagram and asked me to do a live call with him where we chatted all about Australian English and all things Australia really, in order to help his Iranian followers learn more about Australia and why you might want to migrate here, everything like that. I also got to learn a little bit about Iran and the fact that so many Iranians actually speak multiple languages. They don't just necessarily speak Persian as their first language. They tend to be quite often bilingual, maybe even trilingual. So that really blew my mind. And it made me want to get him on the podcast to chat about his process or what it's been like for him learning English, what it was like growing up in Iran, how English was taught, how he ended up becoming an English teacher, and then also the advice that he would have for other Iranians on how to migrate to Australia but be prepared for the dialect of Australian English. So obviously this is going to be pretty specific for Iranian followers and listeners of Aussie English, but also there's going to be a lot of good nuggets in here about how to learn English effectively when you're not in Australia. So how to prepare if you are wanting to migrate here, the kinds of practices that you should implement when you're being an English student, when you are an English student at a school, and a great deal more than that. Anyway, without any further ado, guys, let's get into today's episode. Again, Salam Chetori. Thank you for joining me, and I give you Mehdi Bazyar. G'day you mob, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have Mehdi Bazyar, who is an Iranian English professor. How are you going, Mehdi?
I'm fine, thank you.
So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's a real pleasure to have you here. I thought you asked me the other day to come onto your Instagram channel, and we had an amazing chat there. And you were asking me a lot about Australia and the accents in Australia and our interesting dialect of English. And we also got into a little bit about the different dialects and languages that are spoken in Iran and what it's like over there learning English a lot of people end up coming to Australia. So I thought it would be amazing to have you on the podcast as I have a lot of Iranian listeners. So first, welcome. But can you start by telling us a bit about you and what you do?
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for inviting me. It's really my pleasure to be here with you again. Actually, here in Iran, we have a community of maybe we can call them in European term, Z generation, who really like to learn English. Most of them maybe in order to migrate to other countries like Australia, Canada, or Europe. And so the market is actually very hot, if I can call it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so learning English is, for many of the students, is actually a dream, and many people try to pursue it in order to have a better job opportunity, whether inland or abroad in other countries.
And so what was it like for you growing up in Iran? Do you learn English from a very young age throughout high school, or is it something that you need to pursue later on in life if you really want to advance it in your own time? What was it like for you, and how did you get to the level that you currently have?
Actually, we start learning at school when we are about in 7th grade. We have a book about learning English up to 12th grade. But since most of us are not satisfied with the kind of education we receive at school, most of us try to pursue it in English institutes outside the school.
Is that simultaneously? Is that at the same time as studying at school?
Yes, most of the time, yes.
Wow.
For example, in the evenings, I would attend some classes 2 times a week. I remember when I was 12, I started going to an English institute, and even before the classes in my 7th grade started. Actually, I started when I was in 6th grade, And so it was easier for me to pass English classes.
Oh, brilliant. And so is that the sort of standard that a lot of other people in Iran have as well, where they experience the same thing and they have to go out of their way to get classes elsewhere because the public school systems may not teach them English as well as those other schools?
Actually, yes. Most of these schools do not have enough information and facilities because especially back in my time, the book methodology was based on a kind of grammar translation. Even classes were kind of based on a grammar translation method. So you mostly, at best, could learn to read and write, okay, not to speak and listen. We didn't have any cassettes at the time.
Really?
We didn't have any CDs. Yeah, at the time. But nowadays they have it, but still it has lots of problem because in governmental school it's a challenge to provide for all students the kind of facilities. Okay, so classes are very big, maybe 30 to 40. At private schools, sometimes they are very good at teaching English and other languages. I know some of these schools that are bilingual. You start learning from the first grade by learning both English and Persian. Very few schools in Iran are like that. But yes, that's the case. That's a picture in Iran.
Wow. So you went through all of that and then ended up becoming an English teacher by trade as your profession. Did you imagine that happening when you were a younger, child going through high school and like me, I assume with French or Chinese or whatever language I was learning at the different schools I was at, did you enjoy learning English at the time and imagine yourself being an English teacher, or was that just something that you fell into later in life?
Actually, yes. I really enjoyed the classes because it wasn't like my high school classes. It was very fun to be in language classes in institutes. It wasn't as strict as my secondary or high school classes. So I really enjoyed them. But no, I never imagined being an English professor because we could attend university. We could have both English fields and other fields. I studied mathematics at high school. So I could either go to engineering courses, engineering fields, or language courses. I just picked them as something subsidiary, and I happened to actually accept in that area. At first, it was neutral, but after a while, I really enjoyed it because I found out that this is where I should be exactly.
Well, so what was it like too? Because I can't imagine, becoming a language teacher when it's your native language is a big deal. But doing it in a foreign language and becoming a teacher of that foreign language is an even bigger deal because obviously you get compared to native speakers. So what was the process like for you, sort of building confidence at being a foreign speaker of English, but also obviously being at a very high level in the language and being a teacher in it?
Actually, yes, there were many barriers at the time. When I started university in 2001, I suppose, in 2000, we only had cassettes. There were very, very, very few books with CDs, and at the first year of the university, I didn't have a computer. At the second year, I prepared one. But still, most of the books didn't have CDs. All of them had cassettes, and we used cassettes with very low quality voice. But we managed to do it at the time. And when I was about to graduate from my BA, CDs were very widespread at the time. And so learning, being more acquainted with the listening and speaking at the time was easier for me because I could watch many online movies and I could borrow CDs, and it was easier in 2004 and 2005 in Iran. So yes, there were challenges, and so after some time, with the span of internet and CDs and DVD writers everywhere, we could prefer materials easier.
So do you feel like you had, I mean, you obviously had disadvantages with it not being your native language, but do you feel like you also had a lot of advantages because you had learnt it from scratch and the people you were going to be teaching are going to be people in the same shoes as you, right?
Exactly. Okay. I know the first language. I know Persian, and I know how a Persian speaker go through what levels in order to learn English. In what areas we, as Persian speakers of English, would have problem in pronouncing, in grammar. I have passed some barriers in the way, and so I know my students would have the same problems, and I can prepare my syllabus, prepare my material to the class, and even to error analysis, to do the error analysis easier in compared to a native speaker.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a lot of people are coming to realize just how devalued non-native speakers of English as teachers were in the past, and how much quite often they have a lot more to offer than, say, a native speaker with, you know, the equivalent amount of education, because they've had to go through the process of actually learning it, right? Whereas the native kind of shows up and just has the language already and has to almost go backwards and work out, you know, what am I actually doing when I speak English and how do I teach it, but completely lacks the understanding of the process of going through learning the grammatical structures and the vocab and everything like that. So what were some of the biggest issues that you came up against in learning English as someone who speaks Persian as your native language?
You mean when compared the two language structures?
Yeah.
Actually, grammar was a little bit hard at first. Not that hard, because remembering the structures was not my cup of tea. And after some time, I managed to do it, and because I tried to teach it at the same time, so it really helped.
Yeah.
Other than that, maybe learning new vocabularies was the biggest issue. But the grammar wasn't that complicated, actually.
It's interesting you say that. I was reading something recently about a guy called, I think, Michael Lewis and the Lexical Approach. I think he published these books back in the 90s about how to learn languages, and he was saying that actually students quite often, ironically, get taught all this grammar but don't get taught all this vocab in classes. And in reality, he was saying that when he sees communication break down, it's not because of grammar, it's because of vocab. And so even if you use incorrect grammar, people can understand you. But if you don't have the vocab at all, there's no way of kind of guessing or, you know, trying to work it out. So you kind of need to focus a lot more on vocab actually than grammar, was, I think, the argument he was making, as well as the chunks, the connections that words make and everything, and the structures will work themselves out later on in your mind. But yeah, it was interesting to learn that. So you found that much more useful, did you, in terms of leveling up your English? It was focusing on vocabulary more so than grammar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because I think grammar could be collected in a book, but vocabulary never ends.
Yeah,
it seems like a waterfall of vocabularies, and it never. Even in my language, I can find some words that other native speakers may not be aware of.
Yeah, 100%. That happens to me every day. And if it doesn't happen to you, you're not reading enough.
Yeah.
Far out. So
this is the example that I give students in order to be more confident. Okay, if you don't know enough vocabulary at first, okay, do not be panicked. Okay. Even in Persian, you don't have the repertoire for all the vocabularies. Okay, so do not be panicked at first. Try to be positive in the way. By and by, you can learn different aspects of different meanings, and you can manage it at time.
And I think it's important to focus on the stuff that's relevant to you in your life, right? Like there's hundreds of thousands, millions of words in probably every language, or at least, the majority of languages. But the majority of people never actually learn to use all of those or even recognize all of them. They use and learn what's most important to them on a day-to-day basis. So when you sort of make it more manageable like that, like if you're going to be an engineer, you've got to learn all this jargon related to being an engineer that's important to you because you're talking about it every day. But I have absolutely no idea of, those sorts of terms because I just, I don't talk about it. It never comes up.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, exactly.
What sort of problems do you find that a lot of your students have when they come into your classes, say for the first time? Do they have certain, mechanisms or ways that they've been learning in the past that have been a big problem, and they have to kind of unlearn it and learn a new way of learning that then advances them a lot more quickly?
Sometimes, yes. If they only attend high school and they learned it at high school, yes, I have to somehow reverse sometimes even. But at English Institute, the picture is actually a little bit clearer. And so it's not a big deal. Only it seems that the base is very stiff. So I can put the footing is stiff, and they can continue based on that footing.
Yeah.
But if you studied it at school, it's a little bit harder because communication, exactly what we look for, is not that easy for those who just attended high school classes, because the high school classes, as I told you, is based on reading and writing.
That's the same everywhere, right? That tends to be the problem. That was the same for me. It was never really, focus on communication first and foremost, and the grammar and everything is secondary. It was always grammar and vocab, and then maybe you'll do a little bit of communication.
But at the same time, most of the students feel that they have problem with grammar. Okay, the grammar is what comes first for them. I don't know why. And I tell them, after some time, you can manage it very easily. Do not panic by grammar. You have other issues to be worried about.
Yeah.
Grammar could be the easiest part after some time.
Do you often say or find that the problem is really communication? They don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be correct 100%. I'm not correct 100% of the time speaking English. You'll hear and it'll be the same for you in Persian, I imagine. You start and stop sentences. You don't finish them. You use, incorrectly conjugated verbs sometimes, but it's about communication, not about being perfect every single time you speak. And I think students kind of have to get those two ideas changed, right? And the good thing is that it builds confidence once you can do that. Indeed.
In most of my classes, the very few sessions I actually doing some kind of psychology class.
Yeah.
I prepare the mind in order to, you can learn English. Maybe you had been in a system that couldn't teach you English. Maybe you didn't have a proficient teacher even, but here you can learn. Okay, you have learned your first language. You can learn any other languages you like. Okay, so yes, the first sessions I had to be a psychologist and a teacher at the same time, and after some time, I have to repeat that yes, communication is important. And it's not believable for most of them. They again focus on grammar. They try to go back to grammar, and yes, you have to remind them that communication is important. This is what would actually help you living even in another country.
Well, so I'm learning Portuguese at the moment because my wife's Brazilian and we're raising our child. He's just turned 13 months, about to be 13 months, but we speak Portuguese at home to try and make sure that he has that connection so he can speak with his family back in Brazil. But for me, I had to get past that. I remember when we were living in Canberra, the capital of Australia, which is about 900 k's away from here, when I first lived with Kel. and we moved into a house with a bunch of other Brazilians. And I just said at that moment, I'm the only Australian here. The rest of you are Brazilian, all speaking Portuguese all the time. I'm an idiot if I waste this opportunity to not be practicing. And I found that the first few weeks were terrifying because I was always all of a sudden the person at the bottom of the pile in terms of my skill level. But within a few weeks, I realized that once I let go and I wasn't worried about making mistakes anymore, because you sort of got to see that they didn't really care, about mistakes or anything. They were just trying to communicate. I made leaps and bounds. My Portuguese really skyrocketed. And I guess the point of this story was to say that, I didn't focus on grammar at all. It was just communication. That was the only thing I cared about. If I would ask, how do I say this? Or if I used grammar incorrectly, I would ask them to correct me or to explain something to me. But I didn't, become anally retentive about needing to be perfect. It was more, I just want these people to understand what I'm trying to say. And now it's, if I keep talking to my wife each day and I notice her kind of flinching when I use a certain tense or something, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting something wrong here. She needs to tell me. And then I go away and I'll study it and I'll look it up and I'll practice it. So is that a good method? Is that the kind of method that you would prefer your students move towards when it comes to improving their grammar? It's more try and find when and where you make mistakes and then correct those, but don't worry about, just getting into a grammar book every single day and doing exercises?
Actually, it is the utopian student. Actually, you see, if I can make them have the same feeling about the language, that would be actually, I can say I aced it, okay? If someone can get to that level of communication, that you are not nervous again about you're not nervous about making mistakes, you're not nervous about the structure, you just go for communication. This is what I actually reached when I talked to some polyglots. Last week I talked to Richard Simcott.
Oh wow! Do you want to give a bit of background on that guy first? For those of you who don't know, he speaks probably 40 languages, I think, or at least he's been learning in the past 40 or so languages. So he probably speaks 10 pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they call it actually a hyper polyglot person, because maybe more than anyone else, he has studied more than 50 languages. I asked him about his approach to new languages, because recently, a month ago, he started learning Persian, and it was very interesting for me. And this was the idea of starting talking to him. He's again focused on communication. He said that I need to communicate with people of that language. Okay, so I start learning grammar. Yes, I start learning vocabularies, but I focus on the structures and on the sentences that I mostly need in day-to-day relationship with the native speakers of that language. So communication was, again, for a polyglot, communication was the first issue, not the grammatical structures or even pronunciation.
Well, I think they become very efficient at learning languages. Obviously, if Richard's probably up to 50 or so that he's, studied at different times in his life, he's got a pretty efficient way of getting through the beginning stages of learning the language. So yeah, I always find them astonishing. I always though wonder how much they can maintain in their head, because even with me speaking Portuguese, 8 hours a day, I feel like I'm not making as much progress as if I were living there. And if I were trying to learn, a dozen other languages, far out, I can't imagine just trying to juggle that in my head. But yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting, obviously, too, that they've done it so many times that I think their ego just gets totally smashed. So they're not worried. They're not in their heads worrying about being embarrassed or will this be correct? Will this be wrong? Because they've been wrong so many, probably millions of times, right? When learning the language, that they no longer care. So it's almost like a child, right? I mean, I see my son running around all day, every day, and he's just like not saying any words. Sometimes he'll say car randomly and then just go back to blah, 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 blah. But he's not thinking about it, right? He's not like, should I open my mouth and say anything? Like, oh my God, if I don't say car properly, that's going to be embarrassing. So it is funny. You have to kind of get to that point where you no longer care and you're just like, I'm just going to communicate. And if they look confused or their eyes glaze over, I'll try and re-say what I was going to say, repeat it, and hopefully communicate my idea. So what sort of advice do you have for the Iranian listeners that are listening to this podcast and who are in Iran at the moment trying to prepare to improve their English in order to potentially migrate to somewhere like Australia? What sort of advice do you have for those students as to how they should attempt to do that in terms of preparing their English?
If they are in Iran, I prefer learning a new language. I myself like to go attend classes, okay, whether online classes or the institute classes. This is what I do. This is what, when I started learning French for a few terms, actually, I couldn't do it at home because I like to attend classes, actually, to communicate with other people. And it was very helpful at the time. Maybe after some terms, I could stop classes and I could read it by myself. Yes, if you are a beginner, it's better to start attending classes. But after some times, try not to be shy. Try to make a new identity for yourself. I suggest my students, if you are shy in Persian, you shouldn't necessarily be shy in English while you talking English. English is another identity.
Yeah.
Okay. I used to be very shy when I spoke Persian before attending university, but at the same time, I knew that I have a new identity in English. This is another window. This is a new Mehdi. Okay?
Well, it's interesting because there's probably so much baggage that you have when speaking Persian where other Persian speakers know where you're from, or they know what kind of intellect you have, or the kind of, part of class in society you are. But when you're speaking English, that just disappears. And so it would be the same with me speaking Portuguese with someone. I don't have to worry about, any of that other stuff that they would get if we were talking in English as both native speakers. So it is funny, how the identity kind of changes. And the thing my wife noticed with me is that I make way more jokes in Portuguese than I do in English.
Wow.
Yeah, where she's always like, you're always playing with words and sometimes swearing and joking around when the other Brazilians that we're hanging out with are swearing and joking around. But when we speak in English, you never do that. And I'm like, that's because...
That's very hard because making jokes in another language is very, very, very hard. Being funny in another language is one of the stages you actually reach after, I call it maybe after you become an advanced student. Most of advanced students cannot reach that level of proficiency.
I think you just have to have a good sense of humor, right? I, from the beginning, was just like, that was my way of kind of breaking the ice and just being like, okay, everyone can laugh at me and then we all feel comfortable. And so that became the sort of running joke. It was more than making sophisticated, paragraph jokes. It was more, I'll try and pronounce something. A good example would be, if you wanted to say the word bread in English, like I want to eat some bread. In Portuguese, the word for bread is nasal. You'll hear this pão, pão in Portuguese. But if you were to say it without that nasal thing, which we find difficult, you're saying the word dick, effectively. And so that sort of thing would happen where I'm trying to say something and they would just be like, bah! and I'd get it and be like, oh, all right. So it was good for breaking the ice.
Yeah, it's very good because actually you have found the exact direction to enter the language. Other speakers would connect with you in that language and you can make friends. That's very important in that new language and keep them company. So you have the whole toolbox actually in order to learn that language, I suppose.
So with the Iranians though, what sort of work can they do at home in their own time? So assuming that they are going to classes or that they're somehow getting lessons for English, what's the most productive way that they can spend their time, their own personal time studying in order to prepare for migrating to Australia or Canada or America and having a more easier time of communicating?
Actually, in order to improve listening and speaking, and at the same time learning more about culture, I suggest that they watch movies and TV series.
Yep.
Especially TV series, because the sitcoms, TV series, they go to, for example, if you start watching Friends, which is very popular in Iran for learning language, although it's very old. But actually, you go to into the life of I don't know, 4 or 6 different people, their personal life, how they connect each other, how they make jokes of each other, how they talk about different ceremonies, holidays, and
so you're kind of like a fly on the wall the whole time, right? Like you get to watch some people, a family or a group of people having their normal interactions.
Exactly. So you know about culture, you know about ceremonies, you hear a lot, because I suggest that they listen to TV series. They watch TV series, 3 episodes for 6 months.
Yep.
3 episodes every day, or at least watch a movie every day.
So when you say 3 episodes, you mean 3 different episodes or the same 3 episodes?
Yeah. No. 3 different episodes.
Wow. So it's just it's like high input.
Yeah, exactly. After 3 to 6 months, their listening, especially, and speaking would change dramatically.
Yeah.
They know it after 3 to 6 months, and it really it's a magic actually, and it helps a lot watching TV series and movies.
Is that even when they're not necessarily speaking as much as they're listening or reading? So they're getting mass input from podcasts, from TV series, from books, but that's indirectly allowing them to speak, to improve their speaking as a result?
Sometimes, yes, but I propose for beginners, for those who don't have enough input in reading in terms of vocabulary and grammar, I propose them to watch maybe animation stuff or even kids stuff. Okay, the TV series that are for kids, animated TV series, because the language is easier for when the programs for children are easier and they speak slower. When you pay attention to it.
I did that with French. Le Petit Prince. I was reading that book for a while, and then I kept going up in it helped kind of like as a staircase, right? As opposed to just jumping in and trying to read something very complicated. So it's a very good method.
Yeah, exactly. Because even for starting reading materials in English, we have some shortened version of books in Iran, which is available in bookstores, shortened and simplified versions of books, stage 1 to up to 6. For the reading material, I suggest them to start reading them. But for listening, it's better to start with animated stuff, and so the kind of stuff that are prepared for children. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time they are more simplified when compared to those kind of movies and TV series that are prepared for adult viewers.
Oh, brilliant. And so what's the importance of finding TV shows that are relevant to the culture into which you're going to migrate? So if you're an Iranian and you're coming to Australia, but you really like TV shows like Friends, should you just watch the Friends TV show that's based obviously in a different country in America and try and absorb culture and everything through that? Or would you suggest do the best you can to find something specific to Australia?
I see that the culture is totally different in Australia, even when you compare it with Britain, not United States. The culture is different. And the first thing that a migrant would encounter is the culture shock in the first few weeks. But if you know about the culture in advance, so it's better to actually accommodate with the differences you encountered the few first weeks. So it's better to see the stuff in that are related to Australian English. I told you I found the Old Saint series for my brother in order to watch the Australian version of TV series.
Yeah, I couldn't
And
believe
that
when
was
you told me you'd been watching All Saints. I was like, what the hell? That was on TV when I was a kid, you know, for probably a decade or so. So I was like, how did you find that?
Actually, one of my friends downloaded the whole series.
Wow.
I don't know how and where, but I could prepare the CDs for my brother at the time. And so it was very interesting to have it because we watched it dubbed in Persian, and it was a little bit, most of the things, for example, drinking alcohol, kissing other people, these stuff were censored in the
Oh, really? So they
dubbed
edit that
version.
out?
Yeah, so you lose lots of things about the culture, okay? So I proposed them to watch the not dubbed, but the original version in order to learn both vocabulary, slang version of the vocabulary, the phrasal verbs, the pronunciation, which is very, actually a very big... it's like a dam for us when compared to British English or American English. It seems that in Australian English, I'm not an expert. I just heard some people talking in Australian English. It's a little hard for the first few weeks how they change it. For example, I hear instead of make, I say I have heard it make in British and American English, but I hear it make.
Yeah, exactly.
Might, or mate, might.
Yeah.
Something like this. Okay?
The vowels
So
are different. Yeah. I think that's the key though. That's also, you know, one of those unforeseen things that you would get out of obviously watching a TV show like All Saints. You're not just going to get, you know, culture and all of the other stuff that goes into it, but obviously you're going to learn all the nuances. You're going to hear different pronunciation, different accents, loads and loads of different Australians, women, men, children speaking with one another. And so it may make a lot more sense to try and, as hard as you can, to find some Australian stuff you're going to end up here, as opposed to, like Friends, where it's New Yorkers and their accents are completely different. What do you normally give in terms of advice with accents and pronunciation and the ideal for the student to aim for? Because there's a lot of controversy about should you aim to try and completely remove your foreign accent? How much should you focus on pronunciation? So when students come to you and ask you about that sort of stuff, what's the advice that you give them?
Actually, when I was younger, maybe I started studying my courses at the university. It was very important for me to have a British accent or American accent. At the time, was actually in Iran. It's very it's better to have American English accent. I don't know why. We sit down with SA and at the same time like the accent.
It's a love-hate relationship, right?
Yeah. People, we like each other. I don't know. People can connect. But policy is something else. But politicians, they have their own fights. But people, we can relate very easily with American people. I don't know how and why. But yes, since my books were mostly in American English, so I naturally started learning American version of English.
Oh man, it makes sense. There's way more content. If you're doing it purely based on the content out there, go American English, because the place is drowning in American content. TV shows, movies, books, whatever it is.
Yeah. More than 99% of the movies we watch is from Hollywood, so most of them are American.
The ironic thing is they're probably made in Australia in some sort of studio in Queensland because it's so much cheaper here for them to make them. So quite often they'll use all these big American actors and all of the extras you can see. Oh, that guy's Australian. That guy's Australian. Or this is a gum tree. And you're just like, they're here again.
Yeah, exactly. So to pronounce it, at first it was very important for me to have an accent.
Yeah.
Pronunciation, yes, first we'll start with pronunciation, but to have an accent. But after some time studying teaching English, studying more stuff about teaching English, I learned out that it's not important to have accents. Accent is actually part of my identity. It's part of my... when I go to United States, as soon as I start talking, what time is it, okay? the other people would understand that I'm not from United States. I'm an immigrant. Okay, so I'm not originally from United States. So what's in use of having an accent? It just wastes my time. Learning English pronunciation or any other foreign language pronunciation is important as far as mutual intelligibility is acquired.
Exactly.
After that actually level, it's something you can have if you have time. It's good to work.
Well, there's probably not very many professions, right, where it's rewarded. Maybe if you're a spy or you're an actor or actress or something where you really have to be able to change your pronunciation and your accent, it makes sense. Or if you're a spy and your life depends on it. But otherwise, yeah, it is all about communication first. Obviously, you want to model your pronunciation on a single accent, not just, I'll take some Scottish, I'll take some American, and I'll take some Australian. But then once you get to the point where the person can understand you, it's kind of like, all right, you've done the majority of the work, you can probably take it easy now, right?
Yeah, exactly. After some time, when I started my MA studies, I chose linguistics because I really like language. So I noticed that I don't completely understand the British accent most of the time.
Which one?
And it's very hard. The RP version.
Yeah, got you.
At some point, it's a little bit challenging in some point. So I started studying two books on British pronunciation. So after a while, they were very simplified. They were I just learned some rules, how they change the actually, for example, not pronouncing re and how to replace it with a longer vowel. And after sometimes it became very easy for me to understand British accent. So as a linguist, I really like to know about it, not to speak in British English, but just to know more about languages and accents and dialects.
How important do you think it is to learn the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, if you're a language learner? Is that something that's not required for you to improve your pronunciation necessarily, or is it something that is really useful that will fast track your improvement if you can learn it?
Actually, if you are looking for just communication, it's not that important, I suppose, because you can learn a few stuff and start communicating in that language. But if you want to be more proficient in that language, it's better to learn this stuff. And I teach the pronunciation of APA to my students. If I don't have the pronunciation course with them and I notice that they don't know it, I try to have some very few minutes of each session to teach them how to pronounce them and how to write them. And I tell them that as a language learner, it's very important to know more about the language. When I teach them the graphemes of the IPM, I at the same time focus on the production, the real production of the sound, how they start. For example, for re, we don't pronounce it as English. Say re or re.
Yep.
But in English, we touch the alveolar ridge somehow a little bit.
Yep.
But in English, in most of the dialects and accents of English, we do not touch it. Okay, the tongue is protruded to the roof of the mouth, but they don't necessarily touch each other.
Yeah.
So teaching it in this way could make it easier for them to both hear it better and pronounce it later. Yeah,
well, I found too when I was teaching or creating content to teach people to improve their pronunciation, a lot of it was teaching them the IPA so that they could go away and then use that to look up words or phrases in the dictionary or whatever, and then instantly know, the emphasis is here, or there's a schwa here for that letter, or this vowel is actually this, because English is such a pain in the ass, right? With spelling and pronunciation, they tend to be very different things at times. So I did find the IPA really useful for me at least, especially with Portuguese. Straight away, I was like, how do I use this to understand? Because sometimes they spell it like this, sometimes it's said like this. Anyway, man, I've kept you here for about 45 minutes. We should probably finish up because I've I've borrowed you for long enough. Where can people find out more about you and what you do, I guess, particularly if they're Iranians learning English?
Mostly I'm on Instagram. With Tawani Tarjome. It's very hard to pronounce it maybe in English. With the same ID, I'm on other social media, on Twitter and other social media with the same ID. They can find me, but mostly I'm active on Instagram.
Oh, brilliant. And can people come and get physical lessons from you?
Yes, mostly, yes. Physical, online lessons. Yes,
okay, brilliant. Awesome. No worries. Wow, Mehdi Bazyar, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it, mate. And I hope that all the Iranians, especially listening to this, got a lot out of it.
Thank you, Pete, for inviting me. It was very interesting to have you again, and I really enjoyed the talk.
No, it was my pleasure. I've had so many Iranians on the podcast recently, or at least contacting me. So I see that there's obviously a big interest now, a big push and migration to Australia. So it was my pleasure, mate. But yeah, I'll have to have you back on in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, awesome work, guys. Mehdi, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Guys, you can find him at and I'll see if I can say this correctly, Taavonatajome. Okay, so that is at TAAVONITARJOME on all of his different social network platforms, and I will add the link in to the podcast and the transcript for anyone interested in following him. Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the future. Catch ya.